Welcome back to Project Fierce, presented by Channel Q and A2 Music Productions. Joining me right now, we got NYC pop recording artivist and transgender star Mila Jam, and we are about to have a conversation with Alphonso David, who is an American attorney and LGBTQ civil rights leader. In August 2019, he became the president of the Human Rights Campaign. He's the first civil rights lawyer and first person of color to serve as the president of the organization. What's going on, Alphonso and Mila?
Hello.
Hello.
How y'all doing? Just doing black
We're
and beautiful
holding it down.
today, right?
We're just being black and we're just being beautiful. We're just luxuriating in our melanin today.
How are you enjoying Black History, Black Future, Black Everything Month?
Well, girl, this is the day. This is every month for me, for you, for us, for we. So here we are.
You know what I mean? It's every day, you know? So I think that, but you know what? It's a good time though to like kind of talk about all that we have, I think, overcome, but as well as what I love seeing right now in media is that we're looking forward as much as we're looking back. You know what I mean? We're not just focusing on the history, but we're seeing on Black futures. So I want to kind of ask both of you, how radical should we be? How radical should we be getting if we want to make sure that change actually happens? You know, because some folks act like they're afraid of a little bit of a radical shakeup, you know? So how radical should we be getting?
That's a really good question. I honestly, I don't know the answer for everyone. For me, it's about being as radical as I need to be, depending on the moment and the time of day or the situation. I mean, when it's coming to like talking about Black trans lives, fighting for Black trans lives, dealing with all of those kind of issues, for me, this is like life or death. So, I mean, if I'm having to march, if I'm having to have conversations, that's important to me. But the reality is that we're all dealing with the highs and the lows of what it looks like to constantly have the same conversation over and over and over again, decade after decade. It just is such a pattern in our country and in this and in the social system we live in. It's like trying to help people move forward and progress, but people are so rooted in their ignorance, and trying to make change with that is just really, really tough.
And
long-lasting change.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Alphonso, in your position, I feel like leading up an organization like HRC that is used to, curating the most, sometimes it's not as radical, especially when we're talking about Black trans folks, when we want to talk about decriminalizing sex work or drug use or doing all these things, and they'll really see that as being radical. So in your position, Alphonso, how radical can you get and how radical do you think we should be getting as a movement?
Well, I would say we have to be radical. We all define that term differently, but we have to be radical. Why? Because we have to take a step back and redefine the paradigm. The existing paradigm doesn't work. We can't go back to the status quo before Donald Trump because that wasn't working either. So I think we have to all say, honestly, what paradigm do we want? And when we think about that paradigm, we have to be careful that we're not using existing constructs to define it. Because the existing constructs don't work. They haven't worked for 400 years. Black people
they usually work for white people. They're not working for any of us marginalized folks. I mean, even what's really unfortunate is that when we're talking about equality and being radical and equity and all these things, it's unfortunate that a lot of white cis folks don't understand that this type of freedom is only going to free them too and their whiteness, because whiteness is this like made up stuff that they put privilege, attach privilege to. So how do you see, are you seeing within the Human Rights Campaign and within the movement, are you seeing a progression away from, the days in which we were focused on marriage equality to now being focused on the rest of the issues and the rest of the community?
Short answer is yes and no. And I'll give you the first. I am seeing a radical shift in how people are looking at issues as it relates to our community. Meaning that when I took over the Human Rights Campaign, I said we have to focus on people that are multiply marginalized. We have identities. I'm Black, I'm gay, I'm an immigrant. All three of those identities have been oppressed in this country. So we have to look at people that are multiply marginalized because that is the only way we get to liberation. And many people sort of see that their quest for liberation is directly tied to the quest for liberation for a Black trans woman, to the quest for liberation for a Latinx gay man in the South without access to healthcare. But there are also some in our community that have not woken up. And we still have a lot of work to do to get them to see that in order for us to achieve equality, they have to care about issues that don't directly affect them. And that is a much larger conversation that is not limited to the LGBTQ community. It is how do we think about the politics of the community as opposed to the politics of the self? And for decades, it has been the politics of the self. What policies can affect me and my family? What do I care about most? What are the tax benefits that benefit me most directly? And we have to have, when we say radical, have people really reshape how they think about policy and what they need to care about.
Now, Mila, you
very well.
You like myself, like I love that because before you, I don't think I've heard of the word artivist. Like I think I first heard that from you. So you know, us Black folks, we make.
I'll take some credit. I won't take a full credit. I did not make up the term, and I think when I started saying it, I thought of it because it's something that I think is just a brilliant thought to combine the two, and it makes sense. But I think I did research it, and I had seen that someone else had said it or used it. So I did not create the term. However, when I started speaking it into existence, it felt as if I created it. So, you know,
well, I mean, you are living, you are truly, truly living as an artivist. And I want to kind of ask you, what does it feel like to be a Black trans woman and be an artist, a creator, someone who's just brimming to the top with like creativity, but realizing that you have to sometimes put on a cape and step into leadership within this LGBT community. And I love seeing you hold both spaces of having conversations on platforms with people around leadership, but also singing your butt off and dancing your tail off, you know, on stage. And now, of course, us doing it together with the song Fierce.
Yes.
You know, so many of our peers, and especially our white peers, don't have to do all of that. They don't have to put those capes on. So how does that feel for you? And do you feel like at least the work is paying off in that respect?
I'm going to say I have a lot of thoughts around this, and I'm going to start with what the balance is for me as an artist and as a person that is Black. You know, I want to have times where I can just exist, and I can exist without having to prove my worth, prove my talent, prove my abilities. But girl, the reality is like we can't really do that. I mean, ever since I was 5 years old, I started performing. I've been on TV shows, I've been dancing, I've been singing, I've been touring. And, you know, there's an element of my identity that is really, really wrapped up in my worth being of service to entertaining people. It's my passion, but it's also what people use to validate me. And that is really exhausting. But I also know that that can be a trap because you attach to that and you find comfort in that. And that becomes somewhat of a crutch to you over time. It's like your happy place. So trying to find a balance between just existing without any, you know, judgment or barriers or anything, that's really difficult to do as a Black woman, as a Black trans woman, as a Black trans woman that's in the public eye. So, you know, you've added all those things together and it makes it's just, girl, it's a book. So it's a really deep topic to kind of, you know, dissect. And listen, I've never really said this in an interview, but I'm really into psychotherapy. I'm really into psychology. I'm really into the way that we think and the way that our world kind of comes about with just our perceptions. And, you know, I do it because if I don't do it, this is the work of a Black woman. Black women do what they do and we do what we do because no one else will do it for us. That's just the truth.
Absolutely. That is the truth.
When we wait on, things don't get done. I just have to be honest about that. I talked to my girlfriend, Erica Cobb, the other day from Daily Blast Live about the power of Black women holding the space for themselves is because we're left out in the cold if we wait for other people to come and show up for us, even though we will lead them and we will take them where they need to go and support them. If we all just walked into the rooms that we're a part of and sat back If I walked into a business meeting, honestly, Angelica, and I just sat there and didn't do anything, girl, the whole thing would just fall apart. It really would.
Right.
Like,
I know what you're saying.
More times than not. I don't want to say it always will fall apart, because there are people who know how to pick up slack. There are people who understand the journey and all that. But I have felt so many times, like, if I don't do it myself, it won't get done. If I don't come in with the concept, it won't get done. If I don't come in with a thought about how I want to look or how I want to sound or how I want to feel about a project, it won't be done. It won't get done. And then people will just tell me what it should be, and then it will literally just not work. It'll just be like,
well,
okay,
so what do you think is, when it comes to Black leadership? So, you know, and Alphonso, with you being, especially being the first Black president over at HRC, and being a Black person, as we navigate through the world, and we know, and we've heard, I know at least I've heard in my family about how I've had to work 3 times, and I have had to work 3 times, 4 times harder just to get ahead, just to get recognized. And then even when I'm seeing the leadership that Black people take within this movement, when we're talking about police brutality and we're talking about Black Lives Matter, there's a lot of work that is almost like expected of us in a way. We operate at such a level that other people aren't expected to operate at. So absolutely. Alphonso, what I want to know is, like, how has you been, like, the first Black person walking into that space, but being a Black person in America, period, who has the experiences you do, how has that shaped or informed how you lead in that space?
Well, there are 2 things that drive me to lead in the way that I do. The first is understanding my capacity. Our capacity.
I talk about that all the time. Yes.
We have capacity beyond what people think we're able to accomplish. So understanding my capacity and not letting other people define that capacity has really driven me to lead in the way that I do. The second is to get people to see beyond themselves. So I need to get people to see my experience as a Black immigrant gay man and see value in that experience. So I get my teams to see my experience and assign that value, because we all know that historically in this country, those experiences that I've had, that you've had, that Mila's had, have been marginalized. So as Black leaders, we have to actually force people to see our experiences and assign value to them, because the hierarchy of identity that exists in this country will always put people of color at the bottom. So people of color then have the responsibility, unfortunately, to show everyone else why our value has been marginalized and how to change that construct. And that's how I lead, because I need people to be as invested in my success as an LGBTQ leader, as a Black person, as an immigrant. They can't just be invested in my leadership as a gay man. Because if they're only invested in my leadership as a gay man, we've lost. And I said to someone recently, you need to care about the Black trans woman who is afraid of walking home at night because she may become a statistic as much as you do your sibling. And if you can get there, then really we're talking about realizing the promise of our democracy.
So let's talk about.
I have a thought that I would love to throw in.
I was going to throw it to you. Yes. Go ahead.
You know, this is something that was beautifully said, Alphonso. I just, one thing I really do think about, Angelica, like, we're experiencing this in real time, and you and I are sisters, and we know what it's like to have, like, you know, come up before the conversation, come up before the movement and the tipping point. Yeah. There was a time where it never felt like this would actually happen. And I talked to Laverne about this a lot, what it feels like to actually experience the fruit of labor. That's a feeling that has to actually be, you know, you have to actually adjust to that, because everyone, for example, everyone wants to be rich, wants to be famous, wants to have this, wants to do that. But it feels and looks different when you actually have it and when you're doing it. And a lot of people don't know what that actually feels like. So it's a journey in itself. So, like, there were times in my transition and in my life where I was like, no one's going to care. No one's going to want to know about my transition. No one wants to know about trans women. No one cares about trans women, Black trans women, even in dating. Nobody wants to. Dating seemed different and somewhat easier because no one was talking about it. Guys would just be like, if you look good, I'm good with it and I'm good with you. and no one has to say anything. Now having it be like a conversation piece, this is what's going to happen. The awareness piece that other people have to take stock of now is going to jar them, and it's going to make them feel uncomfortable because they have to really relook at the infrastructure of all of their social ideologies. Then that's a healing process in itself. And we're all constantly waiting for people to show up, and like time is of the essence, and we're just like, okay, well, here we go, having to teach people to do this and to look and to show up and to be woke and to care about Black women and Black people and gay men. It's a lot. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that energy of how we have to adjust to what the positive looks like.
You're right, because I'm still myself adjusting to that space.
We're all adjusting.
I think I'm doing pretty well right now in the sense that for a while it's been very, very hard because people don't know what it is and what it looks like. So they're counting your purse before the check actually even hit my bank account. They're counting my purse before it even hits there. and then as well as like I'm being hit up left and right for, because people think now you've made it, and I'm being hit up left and right for GoFundMe's or for this or for that. But I'm not a white trans actress. You understand what I'm saying? I'm a Black trans actress. So there's even still a difference.
And even those white trans actresses are struggling because they're not white cis actresses. And those white cis actresses are not white cis male actors. It's
Absolutely. So we speak up is exhausting. It can be very, very exhausting, especially for, again, as Black people, it's very exhausting to have to talk about racism and all these things when white people are taking a vacation or can choose not to speak up or choose not to be involved in the conversation. Likewise, as Black trans women, many times it's us that's speaking up. And it's so great to finally have folks who are not trans actually educating other people and speaking up. So I wanted to ask you, Alphonso, how do you specifically speak up for Black trans women?
By making sure that I set priorities for the organization that speak to trans issues. In our lives, our priorities are what's most important to us. And when I set the agenda or the priorities for the organization, one of the first things I did when I joined was create the Transgender Justice Initiative, hire Tori Cooper, make sure we were working with activists and advocates across the country to address issues of unemployment and deal with violence and public education and capacity building. And we've now been doing that for a year and a half, and it's working in certain parts of the country. We still have a lot of work to do. But the key for me is making sure that we're actually doing the work and we are setting the work as a priority. Not just is going to be on the laundry list of things that we're doing, but actually we are leading with the priority being trans lives matter. Because the fact that 44 trans and gender nonconforming people were killed last year.
Girl, that number went up.
Another year in recorded history. And just imagine any other class of people, it would have been on the front pages of the newspaper. It would have been.
My phone would have been ringing. I get an Amber Alert every time.
Notifications.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So it's an indictment of all of us as a culture. It's an indictment that it is not leading in the newspapers. And that is why I see that as my responsibility to make sure that in the work I do, in the universe that I control, as big or small as it is, I'm able to actually list trans lives as an important issue, but a priority for us as well.
I want to thank you both for your leadership, for the work that you do. Thank you, Alphonso, not only for obviously the work that you are doing with the transgender, what was the institute? The
Transgender Justice Initiative.
The Transgender Justice Initiative. I've met with them. I've met with Tori Cooper. Thank you for your sponsorship for the the first virtual Trans Tech Summit. That was amazing. Your team also did some workshops on, transgender people getting and working with their employers. So that was really, really valuable and beneficial. And I also want to thank you, Mila, obviously my sister in the movement and my sister in music now. Thank you so much for just doing the work that we are called to do. And thank you both for joining me.
So fierce. You're welcome.
Yeah. Fierce, the magic word. Project Fierce. If you haven't already, download the song. It's on iTunes right now, and it benefits GLAAD, the Marsha P. Johnson Institute, and the Sylvia Rivera Law Project. We'll be right back.
Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, make sure to like and subscribe and hit that bell for all notifications from radio.com. While you're at it, why don't you check out some of our other great videos.